president and get started with the meeting. So I will call to order the regular meeting of the Berkley Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, November 26th. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Ms. Schluto, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Buckler?
Here.
Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Kempner?
Here.
Commissioner Murad?
Here.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Trotto?
Here.
Chair Kapolansky?
Here. Okay, next up we have approval of the agenda. Are there any modifications to the agenda or motions for approval? That was a pain in the ass.
Motion to approve?
Second. Could you please call the roll, Ms. Schluto?
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yeah.
Buckler?
Yes.
Kapolansky?
Yes. Next up, we have approval of the minutes from the October 22nd meeting. Any changes to the minutes?
During the volunteers for the steering committee, it shows here that just Ms. Murad volunteered. I did as well.
So if I recall correctly, Ms. Kempner, you volunteered and Mr. Murad volunteered as Planning Commission representative, and Mr. Richardson said he can maybe serve as an Environmental Committee representative.
Yes, and I'm wearing that hat. Yes.
Does that work, Ms. Schluto?
I can amend the minutes. In terms of having a representative from the Planning Commission, City Council has adopted a resolution that there would be one representative from the Planning Commission. So it's up to Commissioner Murad, Commissioner Kempner, which one would like to serve on that, or if you both want to apply. And they're going to make their appointments at the December 16th City Council meeting.
Okay, do you know what the reasoning was for limiting it to one representative of the Planning Commission?
Because we only have availability for 13 to 15 people to serve on the committee, and we wanted to make sure we had representation from a number of committees as well as residents at large, business owners, students from Berkeley High.
Okay, so for now, maybe we can just change the minutes and then we can kind of discuss that later. Does that work?
Yep.
Any other changes to the minutes? Or motions?
Motion to approve with the talked about addition?
Second?
Could you please call the roll?
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kapolansky?
Yes. Okay, moving on to communications. I see that we had an edition of the Michigan Planner. Excuse me, so I'm sure we'll all take a chance to read that at some point. There's some items up here related to marijuana business license application, which I'm sure we'll go over as part of that. And then we also had one email from a resident also regarding the marijuana ordinance. Anything else to communicate this evening?
No.
Okay, that brings us to citizen comment. Any citizens that would like to comment on an item that is not on the agenda this evening, this would be your opportunity. We'll ask you to sign in on the sign-in sheet provided by Councilmember Gavin. As a reminder, the Planning Commission will not engage you in any discussion. We ask you to please keep your comments to 4 minutes or less and to state your name and address when you approach the microphone. Is there anyone that would like to comment on something not on the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing no one then, I will close citizen comment, and we'll move on to our first order of business, which is a public hearing to recommend zoning ordinance amendments that would permit marijuana land uses in the city of Berkeley. Ms. Schlutow, do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yes, as you know, we've been discussing permitting marijuana businesses in the city of Berkeley for quite some time. This is the most recent revised ordinance language that was presented to you at the October 22nd, 2019 Planning Commission. At that time, we set the public hearing. This is that public hearing to make a recommendation to City Council for the adoption of the ordinance. The proposed ordinance language as presented in front of you allows medical provisioning centers, adult use recreation businesses in several districts within the city of Berkeley, including the Coolidge District, the 11-mile district, the 12-mile district, Woodward, 12-mile, I'm missing one, industrial district, thank you. And so those would be permitted by principal permitted use. We have a brief presentation before the public hearing that would outline the flow of the application process from the moment the applicant submits their application to City Hall all the way through the development and construction of the building. The assistant to the city manager, Dan Hill, has put this presentation together, and between the two of us, we can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so I know at the last Planning Commission meeting, you were hoping to see a flow chart. So this time we decided to put it together in a step-by-step presentation. So first, we start with the application process. So as part of the process, a candidate would submit their completed application, their application fee, conceptual renderings, and then a basic site plan to go along with it. This is not a site plan that requires engineering by any means, because that would be part of the site plan process. After that, the community development director, as well as her department, would go through and ensure completeness within 1 week of receiving the dated application. If an application was deemed to not be complete, like a signature is missing, she would reach out to those applicants. They would then have 2 weeks to fix the issue. If they fail to fix the issue from there, the application would ultimately be disqualified from the process. Administrative review. So we talk a lot about the merit point system. We've talked about it at, I think, each of the last public hearings that Planning Commission has had. From there, Aaron, the Community Development Director, the City Manager, and the Director of Public Safety would go ahead and sit down together and go through every single application, scoring it on that merit system that will be approved by City Council by means of resolution. From there, they will ultimately decide the top 3 point scorers. Those three would then be forwarded on, or would be notified. From there, we would also be taking all of the applicants. We would list out the applicants and what their score that they got was, and that would be open to the public since it is open for freedom of information, and also lets everybody know where they're at once. From there, those top 3 come before you, the Planning Commission. This is something that you noted on during the discussion last month, wanting to see the site plan review come before final City Council approval. After some internal discussion, we decided that makes a lot of sense, and so we've switched that. And so 3 applicants would go before Planning Commission for site plan approval. From the notification of their points, their merit points based on the first reading of the ordinance Council passed last week. Those points are good for 180 days. So they have 6 months from the moment they're told that they have moved on in the process to get that site plan approval, with the ability to get a 90-day extension with good cause. From there, it breaks down a little differently. So site plan approval, if they receive site plan approval, we would go through with presenting them before council. With that comes those public notice requirements that we have added into the licensing side at the request of Planning Commission and City Council. Those 14 days that would be mailed out to anybody with property within 300 feet of a location, as well as go out in a regularly circulated newspaper and be posted here at City Hall. If they were to be denied, their application would ultimately be denied, and that's due to the inability to review a site plan again for another year. From there, we would move on to replace the denials with the next highest point score. This also allows us to kind of bank in those points. So for that 180-day period, as long as the points are good, we would move on to the next person in the depth chart so that we are working and without having to duplicate the process over and over again. Following site plan approval, they would go before City Council. City Council, just like the liquor license, would give final approval. From there, once City Council approves, they would have to go back before the state. So the licensing and regulatory agency would have to give final state approval for them to operate. Following that, they would be doing their development, like any standard business, opening, and then we have put in a license renewal after 1 year. So following City Council's approval, 1 year from then, they would have to renew. Finally, we have a tentative timeline. So we are looking to publicize the applications 1 month prior to the open of the period. Applications would open February 14th, close on the 28th, and then from there, 90 days would be the end of May, where we would have the administration look at them, score them, let applicants know where they stand. From there, 180 days from there, the end of November. So at a planning commission meeting between May 28th and November 24th, they would need to come before you for site plan approval. And from there, I'll take any questions if you have them.
Well, this is a public hearing, so I want to go ahead and gather those comments from the public, but if you could stand by for questions.
Perfect.
Thank you. So is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item? I will open the public hearing at this point. Come on up to the microphone. Please state your name and address and try to keep your comments to 4 minutes or less.
My name's Mark Schmier at 29625 Bristol Lane in Bingham Farms. The thing that's most concerning is that you put out a green zone, and when you put out the applications, the point scoring basically gives you a demerit of 18 points, so you could be in the green zone, but you're not in the greener zone, for lack of a better way of putting it. So it's very concerning that you start off in a hole in the point scoring system with demerits. I mean, you have green zones, as you mentioned, through 12-mile, 11-mile Coolidge Woodward, but when you go to make your application, you're automatically, there's demerits if you're the third item down, gives you 18-point demerit. So that's concerning, and you know, it's not fair, and I think it should be addressed. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience?
Hi, Dan Amori, 3249 Wakefield. And as a resident of Berkley, I just wanted to voice my support for passing this law. I think, especially with the scoring system and how it is, this has the potential of bringing up to 6 new businesses to Berkley, with the fact that we actually have to bring an additional business to get extra points, minimum of 45 jobs, and renovating many vacant buildings, plus extending our downtown from 12 mile to 11 mile. So living here, I think it's going to be a real big benefit to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to comment on this ordinance?
Kurt Height, Berkeley. I just want to say, I do support the passing of this ordinance, but I also like the way it laid it out, and it also provided for it to come before Planning Commission to get site plan approval before it goes to council, and it made sure that you guys would get a chance to see it. I was a proponent of that, but I wasn't a proponent of having a public hearing or making it a special use. But I wanted to make sure you guys did get a chance to see it. So I'm glad to hear that they figured something out there for.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to comment on this ordinance?
Good evening. My name is Faris Ader. I'm a local attorney. We have offices, I work for marijuana licensing attorneys. We have offices in Royal Oak and Troy. I've been practicing marijuana licensing law for over 10 years. I actually had a similar concern to one that's already been brought up. I urge the council to reconsider the 18 extra points given to 11 Mile and Woodward compared to the rest of the green zone, and I'll explain why. when the map is put out, there's sort of, and this happens in every city, there's a frenzy to start tying up these properties, whether it's purchasing them or putting them under contract or leasing them out and stuff like that. And the reason that happens is because if you wait till everything's completely finalized, there's nothing left. So a lot of, we have some clients that are, have been invested in several properties in the green zone. I think that 18 points was surprising for those particular portions of the green zone because it's somewhat arbitrary in that, it gives 11 Mile, Woodward, the portion of Woodward east of downtown and a portion of 12 Mile east of downtown, extremely unfair advantage to the point where there's not that many licenses that are being given out by the city. They're being awarded by the city. And if you're not in one of those special places where you get those 18 points, it's literally probably going to be do or die. So there's all these applicants from other parts of the green zone that are going to apply, that are going to pay the application fees, that are going to pay everything else that goes into this, and then maybe get off, probably most of them will get denied based on competing with people that are in those special areas. And I think as far as the city, looking at it from the city's perspective, you potentially are getting rid of the most qualified applicants, and I'll explain that as well. So that 18 points, being in particular parts of the green zone there, be like 11 Mile or Woodward, is more important, gives you more points than having successfully operated a state-regulated retail business in Michigan in the past, more important than creating 15 or more new jobs, more important than being owner-occupied, more important and more points than having successfully operated a marijuana business before, more important than demonstrating to the community the increased taxable value that you're creating. So I urge the commission and the city before passing this to consider getting rid of that or at least lowering it and making it less important than some of those other things that I think will, because you're potentially disqualifying the most qualified candidates, and that was my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Chris Clampy. I'm a small business owner here in Berkley at 2838 Coolidge. I just want to say thank you for putting this merit system together and this ordinance. I applaud you on the efforts that you've done so far and the task you have ahead of you. I want to say that this is a perfectly fair merit system. I believe it's perfectly objective. The one comment I have that could become subjective is around the additional business that we need to bring to the community to score 19 additional points. I think the rest of the merit system is completely fair. I'll repeat that. But I just hope that the objective nature stays in place as we propose a secondary business. And I hope it's not a subjective manner. What I'm really getting at is we're in an industrial zone, and there's very limited businesses that we could actually put there to complete that point system to get every point, which we potentially have currently in our application. I'd like it to be made fair across the board with that additional business. That's what my comment is. I hope it stays that way, completely objective. And I think it's perfect as is. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Eric Clark, resident, Oxford Road, Berkeley. Just want to say as a family guy and a resident that I think that the areas that you guys have chosen are relevant and make sense to the development needs here in the city of Berkeley as our families continue to adapt here, as more families continue to come here and adapt here. It's really important that we focus on areas that don't have the developmental structure that a few other areas do have. I say that as a guy who owns multiple businesses. My most well-known business is Toyology Toys, which is a local retailer here that's focused on family and wellness. And I say that because this industry is parallel to that. It is family and wellness specific, and we need to make sure that that's a first and foremost thought for us as residents and for you as council. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to comment on this item?
Good evening. My name is Doug Stewart, 1000 Round Lake Road, White Lake. I work for a consulting firm, retired from the Oakland County Sheriff's Department and DEA, and we do consulting for municipalities throughout the state for cannabis. The only problem I see is your scoring is unfortunately going to cause issues for the city, because if you have separate green zones and you have point system for these different green zones, you're eliminating a whole section due to the point section, due to the points, which could create questionable of why one property is worth another property on your green zone, which again, by the city taking in money on a basis for the actual license, knowing that some of these people won't have a chance just because they're not in the proper green zone. So a green zone should be a green zone. There shouldn't be extra points for it on the one matter. The other thing too is I understand you want to develop some of these properties, some of these areas, but you want to make sure that you have the proper people running these facilities, okay? And put the property location on a point system where it's rewarded more than the experience of actually operating one of these cannabis industry projects, I think is wrong, because you're not going to you're not doing your due diligence for your citizens by getting the proper people in these facilities. You're just putting, hey, there's a location that we want, this is what we want developed, but you want to make sure that you have the proper people in there, and the point system should reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Kurt Height, Berkley. I had a question about I heard the talk about bringing in a separate business, but it's not included in the paper that's on the desk, so I had a question regarding that. Is it, now, if they propose a separate business, does that business also have to stay in operation for the duration while the other business is in operation, or can they open it up and then close it down a short time later? I mean, is it something that has to be maintained and operated? I just didn't understand how that worked. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. There were a number of questions that were raised, mostly having to do with the merit system. We here at the Planning Commission are looking just at the ordinance, so we cannot change the merit system, but I think it would be worthwhile to get some of these questions answered. So I don't know which one of you wants to take the lead on that. Kind of go through the list here. So there were several individuals who mentioned the 18 points for locating within what I wrote down as an optimal zone, or I don't know what you want to term it, but for specific areas of the determined green zone. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why that's structured the way that it is?
Yeah, so those are some areas that are in need of a little bit more incentive for development. So of the green zone, the area that didn't get additional 18 points was an area that's part of the DDA downtown district. And so that area already gets an incentive in the fact that they get DDA dollars put back into them. They have access to facade grants. They have access to a lot more development-friendly RRC sort of things, whereas the area on 11 Mile has a lot more dilapidated buildings, as well as Woodward, and that east side of 12 Mile. Those areas don't have as many resources as perhaps the downtown area.
Okay, so that was the thinking behind that.
Yes.
With regards to the additional business, and Mr. Height's question about whether or not that would have to remain open while the marijuana-related business is opened?
That's actually a very good point. Part of our review process was the fact that they would have more of a multi-use in some of these businesses, where there would be a non-cannabis use on the property, kind of spur development. That was our method of thinking. We really haven't looked at it in terms of, is there a requirement for them to stay open for 1 year, 2 years, as long as the marijuana business is in play. We haven't looked at that, but that's something that we can review administratively.
And as far as the merit system, the way that it's structured right now, has that structure been approved by council at this point?
It has not. Council wants to wait and go through the adoption of the licensing ordinance as well as the zoning ordinance first, and then they will adopt the merit system by resolution. It has gone through a few tweaks and changes from the city council meeting that was last week, and then we had an administrative meeting this afternoon where we went through some more of these finer points as well. So it is still a document that's in flux.
Will there be more opportunities at the city council level for the public to comment on that structure?
Yes.
Okay, so when would the next available, do we know what that date would be at this point? So could let people know?
Is it on?
So we've talked a little bit about we like to do a discussion phase, and then as well as when we actually present the resolution. We're looking at potentially December 16th for a discussion on it. Of course, that's pending agenda being set, but we are looking to ultimately bring it before resolution at the January 6th meeting.
Okay, so people should stay tuned to the website to see that final agenda for the 16th of December, whether or not this is on that agenda.
Absolutely.
Where the merit system would be discussed in depth, and you'd have the opportunity to talk with the body that would actually be putting that in place. We here are focused on the zoning ordinance exclusively. So is there anyone who has questions on the items that are under our purview or anything for an ancillary discussion? Mr.
I do.
Marin?
So now that we're going to be doing a site plan review prior to council making the final decision, are we then making a recommendation to council rather than approving the site plan?
So part of that process of them getting a license is we would say they have their site plan approval. So you are approving the site plan, but that approval is contingent on them moving forward in the process.
So it's a conditional approval.
Yes.
That was the only question I had.
It would be kind of similar to like a special land use type of situation where you have one other thing and then you have the principal permitted use of the site plan. So they would have to, they wouldn't be able to move forward with the licensing until their site plan was approved.
Okay.
Other questions from that end of the table? Mr. Richardson?
We're going to keep this to ourselves,
Okay.
this part. So I'm comfortable with the changes that you made. I had concerns from a legal point of view whether council was sidestepping the zoning and planning enabling laws the way you had originally configured the process. I didn't do the research, so can't be definitive on that, but I just thought that was an issue. But I think you've more or less resolved that issue. So you've also satisfied my concern about public notice. That was one of my two big concerns. My other concern had to do with the general newness of these kinds of businesses, our lack of experience with them, everybody's lack of experience with them. It was for that reason, along with the notice issue, that I wanted to go the route of special use. So I'm not going to die on that hill. It's obviously the council's desire not to go that way. But I think you've done a pretty admirable job of getting us to a point where there's genuine public input. And I would just reiterate the chair's comment, just so everybody's clear. This body doesn't have anything to do with the point system or the licensing ordinance. We're just here to potentially amend the zoning to allow these facilities within the districts that were listed. That's all we're here to do tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? The Planning Commission is asked if we're ready to make a motion on this item this evening, and Ms. Schluto has provided us some sample motions for the various items on the agenda. If anyone is ready to do that. If not, if there's any additional discussion or questions.
I'd move to recommend approval of the ordinance to amend sections 138-363, 138-387, 138-417, 198-427, 138-442, 138-472, 138-487, and add new section 138-528 to Chapter 138 zoning to establish zoning requirements for marijuana businesses.
Support.
Any other discussion on that motion? Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Kapelansky?
Yes. Okay. Moving on then to our next item, which is Site Plan PSP 0619. For 2219 LLC, requesting site plan approval for facade and site changes at the former La Salette School building located at the southwest corner of Coolidge and Oxford. Ms. Schluter, do you want to give us an introduction on this item?
Yes.
Yeah. That's excellent.
Thank you. I'd like to reference my November 10th, 2019 review letter. This property and this project is for the redevelopment of the former La Salette Catholic School and Academy that's located on Coolidge Highway between Oxford Road and Harvard. The proposed redevelopment of the nearly 22,900 square foot building will include converting the former school to multiple family residential, proposing 55 dwelling units that will be on 3 floors. The proposed redevelopment will include studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom apartments. The proposed development will not increase the footprint of the building nor increase the height. It would just be reoccupying the existing building as it is currently on site. As you may recall, the subject property is zoned RM, multiple family residential. This project actually came before you previously at the July 23rd, 2019 meeting as a conditional rezoning. The applicant was requesting to rezone the property from office district to RM in order to move forward with this multiple family development. City Council had the first reading of the conditional rezoning at the August 12th, 2019 meeting and the second at the September 9th, 2019 meeting, and both were approved unanimously. Part of the conditional rezoning is the applicant has a certain finite amount of time in order to get this project going, so we've been kind of under a timeline. The applicant submitted their first site plan intended to be reviewed by the Planning Commission back in September. However, there were significant engineering issues that needed to be addressed prior to being reviewed, and the applicant has met with the representative from HRC, the city's engineering consulting firm, the DPW director, the community development director, myself, and we have gone through a number of those issues that they needed to address. The site plan that you see before you reflects those changes that they have made. I did include the initial review letters in your meeting packets just so you had a frame of reference of where we had been going since you had seen this project back in July. Per Chapter 138 of the zoning ordinance, the Planning Commission will review site plan for development in the multiple family district, as well as any developments that include construction of a building, structural alteration of a building that includes adding floor area or height, additional parking, and facade alterations that include any change in the exterior surface material or changes in the number of windows. The proposed redevelopment will include structural alterations of the interior of the building, as well as facade alterations that include changes in the exterior, and additional parking is also proposed. There are several criteria that need to be looked at by the Planning Commission in order to grant an approval this evening, and I'll just go through a couple of the highlighted areas that need to be addressed or discussed at your leisure. So the parking requirement for a multiple family residential development is 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. The site plan shows that there would be 55 dwelling units, which would require 110 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 109 parking spaces. They are proposing to include bicycle racks on the site, which would then satisfy 2 vehicular parking spaces. So therefore, their parking requirement is reduced to 108 parking spaces. So with the proposed 109, they have met that setback or that parking requirement. The location of the bicycle rack is something that should be discussed by the Planning Commission this evening. Per the ordinance, the bicycle rack shall be visible by the main entrance of the structure of the facility, and where it is currently located, it's tucked behind in a corner of the rear part of the building. It's not located within view of the either the front or rear or any entrance whatsoever. The Planning Commission does have the authority to approve an alternate location of this bicycle area if deemed appropriate. The applicant, we have also requested the applicant propose or provide a rendering of the proposed bicycle rack to ensure compliance. There are a number of examples in the zoning ordinance of acceptable bicycle rack designs, and so we would ask the Planning Commission to make a judgment on whether they feel that's appropriate. One of the other criteria is that there are a number of sidewalk flags along Coolidge and Oxford that are deemed to be uneven, broken, cracked, or raised. The applicant has provided on the site plan that they would replace as necessary, and we would request that the applicant provide a timeline for replacement, as well as designating which flags are going to be replaced during their construction phase. There is an outstanding issue of the turn radius into the site from the Oxford Road. The ingress-egress, there's a landscaped island right in front of one of the parking aisles, and based on the fire marshal's review and analysis, there isn't a large enough turn radius for a 45-foot ladder truck, which we now have here in the city, to make that turn to onto the site in cases of an emergency. So we would request that the applicant modify the parking island to meet that ingress-egress requirement by the fire marshal. We feel that's something that can be approved administratively, but it is something that would work for the benefit of future residents. The applicant has proposed several areas of additional landscaping, both along the perimeter of the building itself and then along the front right-of-way area. We would request that the applicant show how the dog run area in there is going to be fenced a little bit better. If the Planning Commission determines that a dog run is appropriate in that area, we would request something a little bit more dense for screening rather than just the deciduous trees that are planted there now. Coolidge Road is 30 miles an hour. There's going to be a number of people driving slowly up and down, as well as pedestrians walking along that area. So we would request that additional shielding be made for those people. So based on my review letter here, and I have included a letter from both the fire marshal and HRC, so we all have several minor conditions that we feel should be addressed by Planning Commission. We feel that these could be approved administratively if deemed appropriate by the Planning Commission. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation this evening? Or do you just want to stand by for questions? Either one's fine.
Stand by for questions.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item?
Yeah, Kurt Height, Berkley. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the applicants' work that they've done on this, and you know, as somebody who had been critical of some of the plans that were from the past, I'm very happy to see, you know, what they have done and how far we've come, and that this is a lot more acceptable, and I feel that they've done a great job, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Okay. Then I will open it up to the Planning Commission for discussion and questions. Who would like to begin? Mr. Murad.
Go first. So my first question is, in the plans, I've searched these floor plans, I don't know how many times. Is there going to be an elevator in this building?
When you come to the microphone, if you could state your name.
It's already existing. Yeah. Hi, my name is Steve Friedman. I am the developer of this project. Yes, there is an elevator there's currently an elevator in the building, and we are going to be upgrading it and for the residents to use.
It's not called out on any of the plans. I don't see it.
I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
It's currently there, and it is part of the plan as proposed, so.
Okay.
We can, when we submit our building permits, it will have an elevator in the final document. It's in the area of the gym, where the gym built, the gymnasium and the old school are connected.
Yeah, I see like one area that's called a Chase, but then when you get to the second floor, it's not there.
Ms. Lutard, since we have the computer here, can we pull the plans up on the projector?
So there's a Chase. That's right, that'd be the connection between the existing building.
Let's go to my drive.
Do we have the architecture?
Yeah.
This is
Yep, go back
First
to
floor
the
plan.
subject. Yes, and then go back.
standard elevator shown.
I assumed it was. This Chase was.
Planning Commission.
And I see this Chase area, but, because this is the part of the, where's the gym?
These are individual items, so just go to number 2.
This is the gym, isn't it? No, this is the gym right over here.
I'm upside down, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
So if someone could go and kind of point out where that is on there, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so it's it's located in the same location that it's always been, so it's right here.
Next to the stairs.
It's
right
next to
there?
that stairway, that little square?
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Disappears.
But you're right, it isn't it?
Yeah, it's not labeled. So, all right.
Sorry about that.
It's not in the same place on every floor either. Yeah, I haven't looked at that, but I did see that space but it wasn't called out, so.
No, it's not on the first floor, it's only on the second floor. Well, the plans aren't finalized yet, so.
Are you planning any sort of a barrier-free unit, like for somebody that's with disabilities?
Yes, we're required to.
Okay, all right, good. That's good to know, too. All right, in regards to the ingress egress on Oxford, your location where you have that, I think if you just shifted that over so that you could drive straight in, that might help with the issue public safety has with the fire truck. Either bring it straight in or...
There are some issues in the right-of-way
Yeah.
that we were trying to avoid.
Okay.
So I'll let our engineer communicate that to you.
All right.
Mitch with Stonefield Engineering, 607 Shelby. We previously had this access drive lined up, but we ran into an issue with DPW where this hydrant, we couldn't relocate it. We also have a DT utility pole on the other side.
Ah, okay.
So we had to kind of split the difference between the two to avoid relocating all the utility poles or fire hydrant.
And we would take that island and modify the island that was referenced to so that it would work for the fire truck.
Perfect. All right. Let's see. Yep, got that one. All right, photometrics. There seems to be some bleed on Oxford, on the side of Oxford. I don't know if there's a street light there or something that's causing some bleed, but
It's on there.
I can't answer that specifically.
yeah, here it is. It's the 9th page of your plans.
Yeah, right at the entrance aisle there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to keep that lit up. I think the requirement, correct me if I'm wrong, is 1.5 foot candles at that point, and we're at 0.9, 0.7.
Yeah, it's 0.7, but it bleeds off over into the other sidewalk even, north of the property there.
Ms. Schluter, do the photometrics meet all of the requirements of the ordinance?
Sorry. During my review, it appeared to be, but I can take a more detailed look at that, absolutely.
Take a look at that.
Yeah, we'll work with her to revise it to make sure that the lighting levels meet requirements, but I'm fairly certain that we do meet requirements here.
And then for the dog run area, where's the landscape plan? Right here. No, it's right here. So you're going to put, like, what kind of fence are you planning around that?
Quite honestly, I'm not in love with the location of the dog run or the dog facility. And I would like to work with the city to modify it to accommodate an alternative, either location or a combination of screening and all that kind of stuff, because personally, I don't really think it's the appropriate spot for it.
All right.
I mean, it's right in front of units. It's right next to the door. I mean, it's just, it's not a good spot.
Right. Okay. I would agree
So we're
with
on the
you.
same page on that.
Yeah. All right, because I was going to say it needs more landscaping or something there, so.
Yeah, it just has to, we have to rethink it.
Yeah, okay. Stormwater. So you're going to be having there's a second phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's been sized accordingly.
Okay, perfect,
Yes.
perfect, good.
I mean, this stormwater is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it. Hopefully it'll benefit the community in this area for what we're providing.
And then my other concern, and I think staff had already brought it up, is the front elevation is in the old gymnasium area with the windows. Is there any way to at least the first floor and second floor to line up those windows to have it common rather than staggered? It just seems, because I think the lower windows are fine for me to have something a little bit different, but it would be nice to have.
Lower levels are the existing windows.
Yeah, it's existing, right, yeah. But where you're cutting in windows, and it's really just on the Coolidge elevation that it troubles me a little bit.
I like it.
So if there's a way of doing that, that's just,
We'll look into it.
yeah.
Yeah, we tried to balance it based on the units above.
Yeah.
There's more units above than there are below. So what we wanted to do was Juliet Balconies up top to kind of define that.
Right.
And then much larger windows for the
Second floor.
Second floor.
Second floor.
Yeah, and that was my other question, was going to be, had you thought about putting balconies at all instead of
We've
this?
thought, yes, we've definitely thought about it.
Okay.
But we've opted to not put them.
Okay, because that would be an area where it'd be easier to add them than the existing school building. It would fit a little bit better, so. Okay, and that's all I had.
Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Trow?
I have a question about compact car parking. Our ordinance does not address that whatsoever, and they have smaller than normal parking spots that are accommodating for compact cars. I foresee this is something that's going to come up in the future, but they're gaining, it looks like approximately four extra parking spots by doing this. And I'm not sure how we should address this because it's not in our ordinance, and it's kind of a new thing that I've ever seen.
Ms. Schluter?
Our ordinance does allow for compact cars, mm-hmm.
Because it defines our parking spaces as 9 by 20, and it doesn't give us a definition for compact cars.
It does,
Section
220B. Mm-hmm. Compact car spaces are permitted provided that they do not account for more than 30% of the total parking requirement. So based on that calculation, it does not exceed the 30%. And they will be clearly signed as compact car parking only.
I apologize for that then.
Anything else, Mr. Trotto?
That was all I saw.
Okay.
I have.
Ms. Kempner?
So first, I know that you said you were talking about moving the dog run. In our ordinance, a dog run is considered an accessory structure, which can only be in the rear of the building. So I don't see any way it can be in the front unless you get a variance for that. My other issue is that little parking lot with the 6 on the side of the building there. Those last 2 spots, those are really, like, I went home and made a little car, like scaled it and tried to work getting in and out of those 2 spots. Those are not very convenient spots. I mean, you have to pull back almost all the way to the far parking spot, and then you're probably still going back and forward and back and forward.
Talking about the parking lot on the south end of the building?
Yeah, well, yes, it's just 6 spots there.
Well, there's
a side door, I guess, and then there's a handicap spot, and then 2 other spots, and then 3 spots at the bottom. Those last 2 spots where there's just a little...
Next one. There you go.
This is as big as it gets.
The mouse and you press the plus sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus. Yep. There you go. Keep going.
You can keep
All young people.
No, down.
All right, right here.
Yep. Right there.
So these 2?
Those 2. Which I guess leads me to my next question is, what is the thought behind having the banked spots that you have in other places? Like, I'm looking at those going, well, you have more than 6 in all those other banked spaces. Couldn't you just leave that as open space or a little patio or something else instead of trying to squeeze the parking in there and use one of the other banked spaces?
You mean the island?
I mean bank spaces.
No, you're referencing we might have 1 extra parking space that we're required to have?
Well, it says banked parking spaces inside these little islands. You have 1, 2, 3, 4,
The idea
5,
for
6. Were they in the count? No.
No, I don't think so.
no, we didn't include those because we essentially didn't need them to meet the requirements, and the idea was to provide more landscaping. But in the future, if we need them for the development to the direct west, they're at least delineated and no one's like building over them or putting things that don't belong in a parking space. The southern parking lot, those radiuses we got on those corners are 3. I agree it's not ideal, but we have seen in residential as well as commercial that you can pull out and get back. You can pull in and
I
get out.
eventually was able to do it with my little scale guy, but it's not an easy in or out.
There's not a good solution for there because you can't punch into Coolidge. Ideally, that's what you'd want to do there. So
It's sort of accessible. It's a very accessible location for the south end of that building for those who maybe want their parking to be as close as possible. Suburbans are going to be problems there. But smaller cars are really not going to be problems.
Are they at their max for the bike rack and the deduction? That's okay.
It never hurts to have them, even if they're difficult to maneuver for some people. Some people will not have a problem maneuvering. I would have a problem maneuvering.
My husband's car would make it just fine. Mine wouldn't.
So it's really going to be, and people are going to realize that, and they're going to, those that want to park there will park there, and if it's hard, they'll figure out a way to get out, and some will be easy. So, but having them I think this is a good convenient spot. By moving the dog facility, we are able to enhance that area with maybe some of the landscaping that you're looking for. So I think I would like to have the parking on the south end there, as many as we can get, even if a couple are tight.
And just as a reminder, we do have several 1-unit bedrooms. So although we're required to have two spots per apartment, there is going to be,
the reality is
foreshadow that there's going to be some units here where they are only going to have 1.
And the reality is we're heavy on parking.
Right.
Very, very heavy on parking. Your ordinance
is strong.
It's strong.
It's
I mean, it's just, compared to many other of the more recent developments that are being done, this is a high level of parking. So our guess is we're not going to use a lot of the parking spaces. And if this is a problematic area, some people won't park there. Or maybe 4 cars will park there.
Mr. Patterson, yes, sorry.
I just had a question. Last time you guys came before, there was talk about the historic statues on the front of the building or throughout the building. I forget the name of them, and I probably couldn't pronounce them anyways.
Yeah.
There was historic statues on the building. Are those going to remain, or were they moved? Do you know remember what I'm referring to?
I don't remember.
That was a different presentation last year.
They were on either, or they are on either side of the entrance, and they're more.
We're not changing the facade.
Okay, so I was just checking on the statues or facade of the building. I don't think they were changing. I don't remember the name of them, but.
Also, in the site plan here, there's actually 2 sign locations. One is the existing sign, and I believe is to the north, in that corner to the north, there's one there as well. We don't need 2 signs. So if we want, and we can work administratively to decide whether we want the main sign that's existing there, or we just want to go with but I think we should just have 1 sign. And your discretion as to which one you want us to keep.
Ms. Buckler?
I have a question. What is, and I'm sorry, I'm not an architectural finish person, synthetic plaster? Is it plastic?
I can't answer that one.
Is it EFS?
Is it EFS? That's what I keep thinking. Is it EFS?
Like
'Cause we really don't like EFS.
No one likes EFS,
So I'm channeling Marty here.
The synthetic plaster, right, has fiberglass in it, right? So you can, when you trowel it, versus a real plaster, right, where you have to have screen mesh on it and the whole process like you'd find in Italy or in Greece, right?
So is it going to fall off?
No.
Okay. All right. And that's just going to be kind of a putty color then, like a concrete color, or a grout color?
Right.
All right. Okay, fair enough. I need to say, like, I realize what our ordinance says, but there's just way too much parking. There's going to be a sea of asphalt out here, and it's going to, thank God it's going to be hidden when I drive down Coolidge, but it's a sea of asphalt, and we really need to redo our parking ordinance because there is not going to be 2 cars per unit. I know they'll have occasional visitors, the off hours of the church, whatever, but it is just, it's going to be a sea of asphalt, and you have so much stormwater to manage from it. Because right now, I don't know if there's any collection. It just seeps through the cracks, assuming.
Well, there will be, there's going to be.
You're going to have a lot.
Major systems being put in there to collect.
It's going to dry out that entire corner, I think, when you finally collect it all. I like it. I like, I'm sorry, Mr. Mudd, but I like the windows. I like the offsetness of that's not a word, but of the gymnasium windows. I like the higher ones on the 2nd level and the little Juliet balconies on the 3rd. I think it provides some interest. I like this project. I think these apartments are going to rent in a hot minute. And they're going to be gone before you finish, paving the parking lot. So
you probably wouldn't let us occupy if the parking lot wasn't.
Well, I have nothing to do with that, and apparently we do everything administratively. So that's up to these guys. I think it's a great thing for Berkeley. I'm glad it's moving forward. Do we have a conceptual site plan that shows what your potential 2nd phase would look like, or do we have an idea?
Nothing at this point.
Okay, that's okay. I'm just curious, but I think it looks great. I'm happy, and I'll be happy. I think the business owners on Coolidge are going to be very happy with how many people total, do you think?
There's 55 units.
So it could be 100 people or 90 people.
Antisocial, there'll be 55 people. Who knows?
That's a lot of people to buy hot dogs and pizza, so, all right.
Yeah, it'll be a cool building to live in.
Yeah.
Bottom line,
Awesome.
it'll be really interesting.
Very happy, thanks.
Mr. Richardson?
In terms of the capacity of your stormwater detention, how many additional units maximum can you accommodate the way that's going to be sized?
For the neighboring unit?
Yes, for the phase 2.
We treat it at a 0.9 C value, which would be 90% impervious. That's how it's calculated. So, it's fair. It's a little oversized for what could come in the future.
Based on impervious, not
90% pavement. It's either landscaping area or pavement.
Oh, okay. Well then, or you'd have to do some calculations to work out the square feet and then the units.
You're trying to understand how many units could be added into this storm system we're putting in?
Yeah, roughly.
Well, this is a trick question. It's a trick question at this point for me.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of limited. We're really sort of limited. If it could take in 100 more, it wouldn't matter because we're going to be limited to height.
Right.
and parking.
Well, I'm assuming all of that.
Yeah.
How many conforming units is what I'm asking.
We have not gone through that calculation.
Okay, if you've not, you've not.
But you're going to see it.
Yeah.
We're going to come in eventually with the site plan, and you'll see how many units and all that other stuff.
I hope we do. Okay, so a couple of questions are just, I don't know, as much out of curiosity as anything else. You're not going to have any common areas in this building or any rooftop capacity?
No rooftop stuff. Okay. There are some spaces in the building that we're going to try to trick out for some kind of uses. Maybe a little business center, maybe those types of things.
Okay. Can you discuss the demographics and the price points you're aiming for here with this development?
We are aiming for, we think we'll probably get a fair amount of people that are working at the hospital. Okay. You know, that's what we're hoping for. And probably existing people that are moving out of their house in Berkeley that want to get out of their houses and want to stay in the area. In terms of price point, we really got to be competitive to the market. Mm-hmm. So, you know, everyone is talking about new buildings or renovated buildings, roughly about $2 a square foot. The smaller units will be more than $2 a square foot. We have some units that are 470, 500 square feet. Those are small units. Those will be way higher than $2 just because of the way it works out. So, we would like to get as much as we possibly could, but it'll be in the range of. You know, we just looked at a project right down the street over on Harvard. You know, those are running about $1,000 a month. Those are 60-year-old buildings, you know. So we'll be probably $1,400 to $2,200 for the small units, but with the mid-size being probably $1,500, $1,600, $1,700.
My guess is you might get some empty nesters, but these are small units, so.
Yeah.
Bigger than my house, some of them.
There are some very large, oversized units in the basement.
A few.
So we go from 500 up to like 1,350 square feet.
1,413.
1,400.
Ms. Shelto, this development does not create an issue vis-a-vis the La Salette parking requirement, does it? The church is going to have adequate parking without joint use of this parking area?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Early on, we had this joint agreement between.
Right.
Yeah, that's gone. So.
Okay. I also echo the comments about the dog run. I think that's got to move.
Yep.
I think that this is more in line with some of the very original concepts that were brought to us way back when there was first talk about developing this parcel, and I was enthusiastic about renovating the old school building, and I think it's very much aligned with the neighborhood. It's very contextual with the neighborhood. I think it will bring mostly new people to town, which is not a bad thing. I wish I was not as in the dark about your phase two as we seem to be, but it's zoned multifamily, so you know, I mean, yeah, within those parameters, you can do whatever you want with it, I guess. So I'm looking favorably on this. Just one other comment. We're entering in the master planning process in town, and we're looking to develop green infrastructure in Berkeley. And should parking not prove to be an issue, and should it prove that you have chronically unused parking, I can't legally ask you to commit yourself to doing this, but I want to plant a bug in your ear about the possibility of reverting some of the parking space to green up the site a little bit more in the future. I'd like to at least know you're sympathetic to that idea.
So as you see in front of you, the nature of this project has changed dramatically since we got involved.
Yep.
And we tried to bring it down to a comfortable level for the community, so it would be the right fit. And I think if we work together on the parking stuff as it relates to adding the balance of the property in and come to an agreement, there might be the ability to create open spaces or green spaces, as you said. And we're willing to try to do that. It's better for the community. It's better for us too. Like
Well, it's
it's
an
been said.
amenity for your residents, you know.
We're all about that. So if we can do it, we'd love to do it.
Did you want to add to that?
I have a question. So what would prevent you from having some kind of recreational, without being a party location, something up on the roof that gives the residents like...
It gets crazy
It doesn't,
when
okay.
it gets on the roof. I mean, people are up there. You don't want it.
Okay.
I mean, you might want it, but I don't think
I
it's,
didn't mean
I don't
putting
want
a
it.
pool-
I don't want
I
it as
didn't
an
mean
owner of
putting
the
a pool
building
and a
because
tiki bar up
it's a
there. I just meant,
liability
like,
issue.
some-
It's
Okay.
people throwing parties up there. It's
Okay.
the neighbors are going to complain because the music.
Okay.
We don't want that.
Okay.
You don't want that.
Okay.
I have one more question. The incinerator room, is that actually a working incinerator, or is it going to be used?
Do you have an air permit?
That was removed.
Okay.
Do you have an air permit?
I was going to say, I don't see it even being used anymore, so.
Yeah.
I have a quick question, a couple things, actually. The staff report referenced a screening wall, and I talked to Ms. Schlutow about that earlier, and that, I think, is between the single-family residential and the future development.
The western property line.
Yep, the future development area. So my personal preference would be a green screen, landscaping screening instead of a screen wall. And I'd ask Ms. Schlutow if that was something that we could even consider. Is that something that we can do as the Planning Commission? Can we modify that requirement?
I didn't see anything in the ordinance that allowed the planning commission to have that authority. It requires a masonry wall.
Okay. So I know there was some comments from staff that they felt it was appropriate to include the wall now.
We're fine with that.
Okay. Okay, well, that's solved then.
I don't mean to make this uncontroversial, so
Okay.
we're good with all this stuff.
A couple just questions. The bike racks, is there somewhere for residents to store their bikes? Is there inside bike storage for residents? Just a curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about, because the corridors are so large, that we're going to put them on the outside, the outside of
The hallways are
inside.
10 foot wide
Oh, wow, okay.
and 10 foot high.
Yeah.
So
So they make racks that we might be able to put it down the middle, and they store them in them. It's nicer when I can show you.
Yeah, no, I just was curious if there was going to be a place for residents.
Yes.
And then also out of curiosity, what is your timeline for construction? When do you hope to be open?
we had hoped to be able to start in the spring,
Okay,
and that's what we're shooting for.
okay.
Our plans are coming along, and there are a few glitches along the way, which there always are. We're working through that, and we want to get this done as quick as possible. Time is money.
We did need to address the bike racks because there was an issue where they weren't in the front. Again, ordinances are not perfect. They're written in a certain mindset. I suspect we wrote them with the thought of a commercial business and not necessarily a multi-residential, because when was the last time besides I can't remember the last time apartments went in. So, I have no problem with the bike rack being obscured and not in the front, and maybe there's some wayfinding that helps a visitor, but I have no problem with that. So I don't know if we have to, we just have to include that as part of our approval that, I think that having extra bike racks for the occasional person who's going to, ride his bike over to the antisocial people living there. Pizza delivery guy, I don't know.
So I think in the sample motion that we were provided, that is listed as a condition.
Okay.
So we could include that as one of the conditions.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Richardson?
I believe we have the authority to grant a variance as to the location of the rack.
Yes.
Yes, we can modify that, yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's about 30 feet from the rear, one of the rear entrances. I don't think that's too far away.
Agreed.
So it's visible from the parking lot, so.
Fine.
I would also add that I think this site is vastly overparked. I know you're complying with our ordinance.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that, but put that on the list, I guess, because there's a lot of parking.
I was wondering if we can.
I don't think we can modify that, can we?
No.
No,
The
not
planning
on
commission
a
does not
general
have the
site plan
authority.
review.
That's unfortunate.
It is
We
unfortunate.
could on a special land use. Or a PUD.
A PUD.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from the commission, or if anyone would be interested in moving the sample motion provided or another motion they had in mind?
I have to read all of this.
No, you do not have to read all of it. If you're interested in doing that, you could just read the top part and say, subject to the findings listed in the provided motion.
I'll make a motion to approve PSP-06-19, the site plan for the facade and site improvements at the former La Salette School Building located on Coolidge Highway, based on plans dated October 31st, 2019, with the following findings and subject to the following conditions as listed on the memo from Ms. Schluto.
Nope.
I think we discussed everything.
I don't think we get specific enough on the conditions.
Right.
We have to revise that language.
So is there a second before we get into any revisions?
I second.
Okay. Now I'll open it up for revisions.
Thank you. Somebody else can
Number
do those?
5 needs to be revised in that we haven't seen where the new location will be, but a fenced dog run is an accessory structure, so it would have to be, you either can't fence it, and you just have your landscaping.
So relocation or elimination of the fenced dog run?
Yeah. Relocation to the back of the property.
Yeah.
Relocation in conformance with the requirements of
Right,
the
for
ordinance.
accessory structures, yeah. For accessory structures.
Any other changes? No? Okay, Ms. Schluto, could you call the roll, please?
Patterson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Trotto.
Yes.
Buckler.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Hepner.
Yes.
Murad.
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much. Thank you.
Good luck. I'll interrupt you there.
Okay, moving on then. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's,
Just leave it.
no, they're leaving it as brick, but they're doing this.
I thought so. I thought they were redoing it, but then I got confused.
So this is, doesn't have windows now, it's.
Okay, moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is meeting dates for the 2020 calendar year.
Way too expensive.
I see that you've highlighted the December 22nd meeting, Ms. Schluto. I assume that you want us to think about that.
I did, only because it's, right in the forefront of the holiday, and the meeting for, the December meeting was moved up to the week and a half before, this next month it'll be December 17th, so I just want everyone to be mindful of where that kind of falls. And if we want to move it up earlier, we can.
So, yeah, any comments on that? My preference would be to keep it where it is, only because I have a work conflict the week before, but if the rest of the commission...
Or we could run it the day we would normally, could hold a work session, 2 weeks before.
What are we looking
We could do that.
Yeah, doing December next year.
So instead of having it, I don't know what the date would be, but...
It would be December 8th.
That's tough.
December 8th?
22nd, I'm off.
So December 8th is a possibility then? That'd be fine with me.
I'm fine with that, too.
Wait, December 8th is a Saturday.
No, that's next year.
We have a
You're
leap
probably
day.
looking at this year.
In 2020.
I got a conflict, but that's okay.
You have a conflict?
City council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what does everyone think of the 22nd? Is everyone for sure out for the 22nd?
No, I mean, I could do that, but
I mean,
I don't know.
could too, but I would understand that that's kind of a hard, I mean, it's a hard, depending on what's on there, it's hard for residents too, right?
Right, agreed.
Yeah, it's a tough week.
Does anyone else have conflicts on the 8th, or what would the date be the following week?
8th or the 15th.
The 8th or the 15th?
Currently, I don't, but
Right, it's a little ways away.
So you're away?
I don't usually schedule things that far.
I prefer the 15th or the 22nd. The 8th
Might be-
is
no,
a
that's a
potential
Tuesday, never mind.
problem for me
It's your
due
first
to
Okay.
my academic schedule.
So that's 2 out for the 8th, so let's strike the 8th then, as a possibility. So that leaves us with the 15th or the 22nd. How about by a show of hands, who prefers the 15th?
Okay, I think we vote.
Okay, the 15th it is. I may not be here then.
All might
That's what
change.
Marty's for.
Yeah.
Any other comments or conflicts? No? Okay. There is a motion provided if someone would like to do that, to approve the 2020 meeting date?
Again,
Sure.
this one's a lot easier.
Make sure to change the December one.
Right. I make a motion to approve Planning Commission 2020 meeting dates, changing December 22nd, 2020 to December 15th, 2020.
Support.
Ms. Schlutow, could you call the roll, please?
Richardson,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Kapelanski.
Yes. Okay, next up is a discussion for future ordinance amendments.
Thank you.
Ms. Schlutow, do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yes. I'd like to reference my November 18th memo regarding the discussion for possible ordinance amendments to the zoning ordinance. I know I brought this up to you in a roundabout way back at the September meeting, mostly in terms of parking issues, because we were dealing with the marijuana, and we didn't have anything specifically in our ordinance that would regulate parking requirements for a marijuana business. So that's where a lot of this came up. But continuing to move through a lot of the community development issues and code enforcement issues, there are a number of things that I think would be beneficial for us to review. And what I've done in other communities is kind of given a breakdown of things that I think we might want to look at or delve deep into, and then kind of get a sense of where the Planning Commission wants to spend their time and their energies. And we can certainly, I didn't include parking in the list of 5 here. We can certainly, that can certainly be made number 1 if that's where we still want to go, but I wanted to open it up, letting you know that these are some of the other issues that we've been encountering in the Community Development Department. So number 1, we're looking at signs, making the sign ordinance content neutral in compliance with the Reed v. Gilbert case. Number 2, landscaping. We don't have any specific landscaping requirements in our ordinance. We have tree protection ordinance for removal, but nothing that requires them to plant certain things. This makes it problematic for developments such as the La Salette project, only because we're asking them to put forth landscaping, but we don't have anything finite in our ordinance that specifies requirements. Number 3, short-term rentals. This is something that we've seen in a number of communities as being something that they want to regulate, whether it's as a residential use or as a commercial use. And I would like to get the Planning Commission's thoughts or feelings on how they would like to look at that. Number 4, and this is something that Chair Kapelanski and I have discussed, the public hearing requirements. So last year, the Planning Commission adopted the public participation plan, where there was discussion of how to get notice out to more residents than just the standard requirement by the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. That does require the notice in the public in a mass circulated newspaper and notice to property owners within 300 feet. part of that public participation plan, was to expand or think outside the box in terms of that. So one thing that the former community development director was doing, and I have since implemented, was to require a temporary sign posted at those properties where a public hearing would be held. It would note the date, the time, exactly what was being proposed, and then obviously contact information for the community development department if they had any further questions. This isn't something that's codified in our ordinance. We can put that in there if that would be something that the Planning Commission would like to do for continuity throughout any public hearing process, not just things that are through the Planning Commission. And number 5, projects requiring site plan approval. In 2018, the Planning Commission City Council amended the zoning ordinance to allow some administrative reviews. However, with the adoption of that administrative review criteria, they didn't amend the Planning Commission review criteria, so there is some discrepancy on the number of windows versus facade change versus the increase in windows. So we'd just like to clear that up just so there isn't any confusion moving forward. So those are the 5 that I have outlined here, in addition to the parking discussion.
So one general question on this. So in particular, the last item you were talking about. So I think that there's so many different things in different sections of the ordinance. I called earlier today because I couldn't find that wall section. Is there any thought to a general reorganization of the ordinance and making sure we get all of these things in the same spot before we start to tackle amending them?
Well, that's something that we typically we could do after the master plan process is all done. That way we can incorporate any zoning amendments changes that are done in light of things that come out from the goals and objectives of the master plan. It's not uncommon to do an entire technical review of your ordinance. However, that is a very long process, and some things like, well, parking aside and signs aside, but something that's smaller like the site plan or the public hearing, those are things that we may necessarily want to move forward with now, but if you're waiting for a technical review, it could be 18 months before you get that component addressed.
Okay. Ms. Kempner?
So as I go through these, it seems to me like 4 and 5 are fairly simple things to just kind of tidy up, right? So it seems to make sense to just kind of get those out of the way. Whereas sign seems going to be fairly lengthy in process, right? Landscaping, I know we have a tree board. Do you think that they have, can we reach out to them and see if they have any interest in doing something with the landscaping area of
Yeah,
it?
if we were to move forward with that being, our number 1 or the first item we would want to tackle, that would be my first step would be to reach out to the tree board and see if we could schedule some either administrative meetings or a joint work session, that type of thing, so that we're all on the same page with that.
There's also like the beautification committee that would be involved. So
Yeah, we would be reaching out to a number of different communities to make sure that we have as much input as we possibly could to make sure that we're not addressing one thing without causing problems somewhere else.
My other question is, and I'm trying to remember, I meant to look up before we came here today. When Carlisle Wortman looked through the downtown master plan, I know that there were some areas that they said they could look in deeper. And I want to say there was something with parking in that, right? So while I really think that we need to tackle parking sooner than later, does it make sense to start working with them and delving into some of that to see what we need to do before we get too crazy into the parking?
Well, a lot of the parking the parking ordinance revisions would stem from what was already reviewed and what was adopted in the downtown master plan. Those are things that we could look at on a smaller scale than citywide, so that way we could see if those things would kind of work on that smaller scale before it opens up to the entire community. That would work. Because we have a plan in place that addresses that more immediately than our 2007 update.
I think that's a good idea.
Ms. Buckler?
I think if you go back, I want to say 4 years, there was several meetings that discussed short-term rentals, Airbnb, and VRBO. So I think you need to excavate all that research and discussion and see where we left it, because we spent more than one meeting on that.
It was inconclusive.
Yeah.
It was, but nonetheless, we don't have to reinvent the wheel to be inconclusive again.
So the short-term rentals, I did look up how many, we have 4 houses for rent in Berkeley.
That you know of. If you go through Airbnb and VRBO, but there's other avenues and platforms that you gotta know. I don't know.
It seems like a very minor
It is.
thing.
We just had a complaint, was why it came to us. I see no issue. I personally see no issues with them. I mean, they'll get, if they're a bad property, they're gonna get 0 stars and no one's gonna rent them.
Other comments?
Yeah,
Mr. Richardson?
For me, the 2 priority issues are parking and landscaping. I think all these issues are worth attention, but those should be at the top of the list. I kind of see them as interrelated, too. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I think number 5 to me is a big one, because I think there's been recently too many buildings that are right on the borderline of being administrative or come to us. I think in that case, it should come to us, because we've talked about, the way it reads now, it's 50%. And I've heard well, something was 45%. So I'm bring it before us then.
And the staff always has the authority to send something.
Yes, they do. And it seems like recently it's been, okay, well, it's 45%. We'll just approve it. So.
Okay.
I think that one to me is something I'd like to really revisit, because maybe it needs to be less of a facade change for it to be staffed. Because I think there's been 3 or 4 now recently that have not come before us, and we revised it recently because staff was reviewing it and saying, well, it was 50% facade change, and it was a 4-sided building, and they said, well, one facade changed 100%, but the other 3 did not.
Yeah, we talked about the interpretation.
And we changed it to being one single side, but even then, it's still not coming before us, I feel. So.
Should we, as part of that, have inventory the decisions of
I
staff?
think that's a good idea. So if you could.
I'd also be interested in, you haven't been on the job that long.
Right,
But some staff input on what they're comfortable deciding with and what not.
So we're talking about not just addressing the cleanup items in number 5, site plan approval, but reopening the discussion of administrative approval?
I think so.
Clarifying it.
Yeah, maybe,
If it
it
needs
needs to be clarified.
Some people feel it needs clarification. I'd like to know what staff thinks and what the level of satisfaction of the applicants is as well. It's fine to talk about clarifying, but we need to be responsive to what are the problems that people are actually experiencing out there, not just our own personal concerns.
Yeah, but I know there's one business, and I'm not going to say which one, but I've heard it's from public that, well, they don't meet their parking requirements. Well, it was staff approved, so maybe they do. I don't know, so.
Anything else, Mr. Murad?
That was it.
Okay, so I guess my feelings would be to take the easy cleanup items first. Maybe number 5 is no longer an easy cleanup item. So maybe it's just number 4 now. The public hearing seems like it would be easy. I think we have to tackle parking before we can tackle landscaping, because that's going to affect how much landscaping we can fit on a site. I don't want to deal with short-term rentals at all. I don't think it's an issue. And signs is something that I think we have to do, even though I don't think any of us really want to do it. I'm going to have to take a stab at that. And maybe we can look at some other communities who have already brought their ordinances into compliance. I know it gets really complicated, to try to do that. And then I would just kind of go back to the reorganization. I really think that that's really important.
I
so
think
that we
so,
don't miss some of these things that are located in random sections of the ordinance and kind of bring it all together. Like the screen walls should probably go under the new landscape section and not in individual standards.
Well, I have a question about that. There are companies that publish these ordinances. Can they be contracted to do the reorganizing, or is that something we have to do ourselves?
They could. I just don't know if we have the budget for that.
Master plan.
Yeah, well, yeah, the master plan is taking up a considerable amount of time and resources and part of our budget. So if we were to do a full technical review that we wanted to engage a third party, that's going to be a considerable expense.
It's going to be a huge burden on us to try to do it ourselves.
And yes, and on staff, a huge burden. So that's a great idea. If we have the budget to do it, I think we'd all be on board with it.
Right.
Which does bring me up, so today I noticed on the website, they list like proposed ordinances, and then they list ordinances that have not made the code book yet. And some of them were from last January. So I just think that for us, like none of them were super pertinent, I think, to what we do. But if we're looking things up that way, and we approved something 7 months ago, but it hasn't made it into our code book, and we're looking in our code, online in our code book for some of that stuff, that it worries me that there's that much of a lag.
So that's Municode. Is the system that hosts our ordinances, and they only update, I don't know if it's twice a year or something like that. That's pretty much how the website is set up. If we were to go with some of these other third-party vendors that would reorganize the ordinance, some of them do provide hosting services as well that update more regularly. Or we could bring it in-house and have our own PDF that we update of the zoning ordinance ourselves. I mean, there's a lot of different options, but yes, that's a good point. That is a function of maintaining our online ordinance that way. Anyone else?
I just think the whole rewrite of the ordinance was a good idea. It's something that we've talked about recently. So I think it would be wise to start working with the mayor and city manager and council and say, this is something the planning commission would like to add to their list of things to do, and maybe they can start planning for a future budget to
And not just for us, but
allocate that money. It's for everybody.
for applicants. There's a lot of things,
Yeah.
I think, outside of the sign ordinance that
Right.
haven't been updated that need to be addressed because of different court cases and things that we're missing.
Yeah. And it might be, that they spread those dollars over a few years, and
Right.
yeah. So I know the priority right now is the master plan. We have to get that done, but that would be a great follow-up to the master plan.
Mm-hmm. Other comments on
Be
this?
necessary by what comes out of the master plan, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even the downtown master plan really asks for a lot of changes. Any other comments on this item? Questions for us?
So where would you like me to start?
So
we are going to start looking
Public
at the
hearings, right?
technical review. We've got number 5 and number 4 seemed like they were.
I think maybe those first.
Yeah.
Okay,
4
those
and
2
5.
floors.
Do 4 first and
Okay.
then 5.
Short-term rentals.
I think that's the
No.
bottom of the list.
Okay, very bottom of the list. Signs and landscaping, parking landscaping. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably parking, landscaping, signs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, then we will move on to the Community Development Monthly Report. Do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Yes, I just wanted to provide you with the draft monthly report that we're putting out, not only the Planning Commission, but Council. This will keep everyone up to date on things that have gone on in the previous month, or things that are coming down the pipe that we feel need attention. So this report will cover the October 2019 items. So we're looking at 5 criteria: planning activities, zoning administration. These are things that are done more in-house, business license and commercial renovation projects that did not require site plan review. The zoning ordinance, so this would be where we kind of update you, the planning commission or city council, on what we're looking at, what we're reviewing. The building department, that would include the issuing of permits, rental certificates, certificates of occupancy, and then an update on the funds that we have received from the community development grant program through Oakland County and HUD. So this is something that I have provided to other communities just as a way to keep all the boards and commissions up to date on their activities. And if there's anything you want to see included or removed, or you don't like the idea at all, that's absolutely fine too.
Yes.
I really like this idea. I think it's a nice summary, and I thank you for providing it. I hope it's not too much work for you, because I do want to continue to see it, so.
Well, now that I have the template, it's much easier this time.
As long as it's not too much for you. I know you have a lot going on, so I do enjoy it, though.
Yeah. Section 4 is building, permits?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is where you can see, the building permits, a lot of the building permits would be new homes, and it could be driveways, it could be the demos, but just so you kind of have an idea of from 1 month to another how things are going.
Good. I like it.
So is this year to date, the number 4?
Year to date, yes.
Okay.
I think this is great, so it'd be great if you can continue to do this. Any other comments on this item? No? Okay, that brings us to liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report from their various committees?
Planning, or chamber, their holiday party is going to be the 11th at Crispelli's from 5:30 to 8.
Okay. And the holiday parade is coming up too.
On the 7th, right?
The 7th. Anyone else, committees? Mr. Richardson?
Environmental, we met last week. The city council is going, at their next meeting, I believe, is going to consider a resolution supporting a project that we're entering into with the Clinton River Watershed Council Water Towns program. And this project will make it possible for Berkley to utilize the services of Dr. Don Carpenter, one of the more prominent environmental scientists in Michigan, free of charge. Dr. Carpenter is going to, over the next few months, survey municipal-owned property within Berkley to determine its suitability for new green infrastructure. And the project will also provide us with examples or proposed infrastructure, things like rain gardens, various projects designed to retain stormwater. There will be a public participation component to this project. So we'll be having some public meetings after the first of the year. We're also eligible to receive a $5,000 grant, a mini grant, if you will, to get any projects that we are interested in pursuing after they've been recommended by Dr. Carpenter. We can match that grant with in-kind services by the city, or use it as a match for additional monies for the more upscale or expensive projects that we might choose to pursue. So we're getting pretty serious about green infrastructure in town. We're starting with a municipally owned property. Potential projects could happen on municipal parking lots. They could happen on the grounds of the municipal buildings. They could happen in our parks that we have. So I'm pretty excited by this. I think it can kickstart broader efforts, and I will keep you posted and the public posted about this project as it moves forward.
Great.
Okay.
Anyone else? No?
Liaison report for the DDA. Unfortunately, it seems to be on the worst possible day every month for me. I have to apologize. I have not made it to the DDA meetings recently, but I mean, reading through the meeting minutes, they're interviewing for the executive director for the DDA. Other than a few murals that could be possibly going in, I didn't see much else in there. So,
okay.
Unfortunately, I just have not been able to make it to the Wednesday meetings.
Okay. Commissioner comments? Mr. Murad, anything for the group?
Oh, we just have to decide about the master plan committee.
Correct. So is that, as a follow-up to that, the joint meeting is on the 15th of December, correct?
16th.
16th, sorry, 16th of
Monday
December.
the 16th, it's going to be held prior to the regularly scheduled city council meeting. So it'll be here at 5 o'clock to 6:30. Ben Carlisle and his associates and his team will be here and kind of lead us through the...
Here in this room or in...
Here.
Okay. Okay, so yes, that brings us to the steering committee question. So there's only one spot available.
Yeah, before we get into that, I sent out a calendar invite to everybody. Just want to make sure that they could all attend. Everyone is available to? Okay, very good.
Okay, so there's only one spot available to the planning commission at this point.
Yes.
In general, outside of the steering committee, what will be the involvement of the planning commission as a whole? I know we have the joint meeting with council.
Mm-hmm.
How much involvement do you expect the planning commission to have, or will the steering committee generally take the lead?
The steering committee would be the recommending body to the planning commission, so they would do a lot of the heavy reading, the heavy lifting, going through with their various expertise from boards or commissions or their community groups or residents at large, and address the concerns that they have from their point of view. And then that draft language or those type of proposals or that language would be presented to the planning commission. The planning commission would then review it as a whole before it went into the
So
final
is the
draft.
vision that that the planning commission will meet jointly, have the opportunity to attend the public open houses and various surveys and events, but not see the draft plan until it's in final draft form? Or will there be check-ins throughout?
There'll be check-ins throughout. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know how many. We haven't worked out that specific timeline, but there would be presentations to the planning commissions along the way before you saw the draft document.
Okay, so we would have the opportunity for input at those?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
So we have two people that want to do it, which is great.
I think they have to apply through the link, don't they?
Do they have to apply?
Yes, everyone would have to apply.
Okay, so the planning commission cannot send one person recommended. Each of them would apply?
You could recommend one person and they would apply, and if there was only one, then it would be that person, but if there's two people, then they would have someone to choose between the two.
Then I guess I would leave it to applying. I don't think we're wanting to recommend one person over the other. So I guess you could provide the link for Facebook. Would Mr. Richardson have to apply as a member of the environmental committee as well?
He would still have to apply. Everyone who wants to apply or wants to serve on the committee would have to apply one way or another.
What is the deadline?
December 10th.
Okay.
It's a pretty easy link.
So I'll send the email and the link to each one of you this evening.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Murad?
That was it.
Mr. Trotto?
Nothing big, just happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah,
Yes.
that too. Yeah.
Mr. Campbell?
Ditto. Happy Thanksgiving.
Same.
Anything new from this end?
Thanksgiving wishes.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Of course, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. But I would also like to say that I like the motion templates that have been provided. And I've also speaking from my professional background, it's always bothered me that we would never say on the record, the commission finds, items 1 through 5 of the ordinance have been met, and that these templates do make those findings. If we choose to follow the templates, the finding will be on the record along with the action and any conditions we put in. So, yeah, I think they're helpful. Thank you.
Okay, nothing additional for me. Any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.